So guys, our next speaker is Doug Suriano. Doug is the lead iOS engineer at HotelTonight. Today he'll be discussing how he and his team have helped HotelTonight ship great iOS and Android experiences to their customers nice and quickly. So guys, let's give it up for Doug.
What's up, everybody? Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. Cool. So today, I'm going to talk about how moving fast enabled HotelTonight to ship a better mobile product. But just to kick it off, let me just introduce myself. My name is Doug Suriano. I am the lead iOS engineer at HotelTonight. And for those of you who don't know, HotelTonight is the leading mobile app for last-minute hotel bookings for tonight, tomorrow, and beyond. With reach across 1,700 cities in more than 35 countries, HotelTonight makes it remarkably easy to book great hotels at amazing last-minute rates on your mobile device. We are a mobile-only company, and we're available only on iOS, Android, and mobile web. I'm thrilled to be speaking here at Mobilize. And kind of a fun fact, I joined HotelTonight 3 years ago, and the very first feature I was assigned was adding the Optimized iOS SDK to the code base. So I'm pretty happy to be here talking about all this stuff. So today I'm going to talk about how we release new versions of our app. But before I get into how we do it today, I thought it would be good if I started by talking about how we released our new versions a few years ago, around circa 2014. And really, our release cadence was driven by one thing: features. There would be something we want to build. Let's say a new date picker, or we want to redesign a screen on the app. And we would form a feature team and set them loose. And we wouldn't release a new version of the app without a cornerstone feature. And when did we release new versions of the app? We released them when the feature was done. And if that cornerstone feature took 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, didn't really matter. We shipped that new version when that cornerstone feature was ready to go. And I gotta be honest, it served us really well. For many years, that was how we operated. And we shipped great product and great design. But at the same time, HotelTonight was changing, and actually changing for the better. We were moving away from being a small startup to a large organization. We were rapidly expanding our team, hiring lots of smart people. We had a really ambitious roadmap for our iOS and Android apps. And it was starting to get really hard to fit this roadmap into our current release process. So in 2015, we decided to take a really hard look about how we release software. And as an engineer, in my opinion, there were 3 things that were wrong with our releases. The first thing is our releases were massive. So to kind of illustrate this, as I mentioned, in every release we always had a cornerstone feature. And this was pretty linear. We would start the feature development, and then we would ship it at the end. Pretty easy, it makes sense. But the problem was, we didn't have the entire iOS and Android teams working on that feature. We would typically have just one iOS engineer and one Android engineer working on it. So, while that team was building that feature, the rest of the team was working on smaller features, stuff like bug fixes, fixing crashes, adding SDKs, all this stuff. And it would just build and build and build, until by the time that cornerstone feature was done, we had a really massive release. So this leads directly into the next problem that I think we had with our old release system, was our releases were stressful. Since the release was so big and had so many changes in it, a release week was not fun. Everybody was stressed. The burden on QA was awful. And there's always this mad rush at the end of it to get in additional changes. We might not ship the next version of HotelTonight for a month or even maybe 3 months. So if we wanted to get anything in to get it measured, this was the time we had to do it. And the stress didn't stop after we released a new version. If anything, it actually got worse. Since we might not release for a few months, minor bugs, like minor UI things, we might actually hotfix them because we didn't have an upcoming release for a few months. It was all not fun. Next problem we had, and the final problem we had, is our releases were limiting. You know, it's kind of weird to say, but by having more time to work on features, the feature it actually ended up hurting us most of the time by having that much time. It was really easy to let scope run on the feature run wild. We would do major rewrites. We would go down these rabbit holes. We would over-engineer everything. And then at the end of the project, when we would realize we were over-scoped. We would have 2 weeks left, and there would be a mad dash where we would have to quickly put everything together and cut scope like crazy. And then the worst thing is because you just spent 2 or 3 months on a project, you couldn't go to management and say, hey, we need more time on this. We've just spent 3 months. The answer was always no. Another thing, too, is that we were starting to adopt more and more A/B testing, and it was really hard to launch small targeted experiments. If there was no release cadence, nothing stable, so we just kind of had to squeeze it in whenever we could. So our releases were massive, stressful, and limiting. And we decided, of course, that we wanted to change. So we began to look around and do some thinking, and we kind of decided that we wanted to do 3 things, and we wanted 3 things out of our release process. The first was we wanted to cut the time it took to develop new features. Second, we wanted a predictable and consistent schedule to release stuff. And last, we wanted something that made it easier to incorporate A/B testing. So we did our homework, we looked around, and the team came up with 2 systems that we adopted. The first was we put in a release train into place. In this new system we have, we release a new version of HotelTonight on iOS and Android every 2 weeks. And a really important thing is that features are no longer the reason why we release a new version of HotelTonight. We release because we follow a release train schedule. So let me just show you how a release train works in practice. We'll have a bunch of features in development, normally parallel at the same time. And then they go through development, and then when they're ready to go, and after QA has finished tested them, QA will sign off these features. And then, every 2 weeks, similar to how a BART train or a cow train works, a train will come to the station. And everything that's signed off and ready to go into our main branch will get moved onto the train. And then, the train leaves the station, right on schedule, every 2 weeks. And this process continues all the time. So more work gets done, another train comes to the station. And notice we have all these features still in development. We don't stop the train because we have other stuff that's not ready to go. The train leaves. And right on schedule, all this remaining work will get shipped whenever it falls on the train. And this has been really good because now, instead of releasing every 2 or 3 months, we release every 2 weeks. So the team has gotten really good at this whole release management. There's a lot more process in place. It doesn't feel like this stressful thing anymore. It's really just second nature to us now. The next thing we did was we implemented a new system for scoping work called an evolution. And an evolution is how we measure feature work. And we define evolution as 7 days of development and 3 days for QA. And we try to contain most feature work into one evolution. This is great because now instead of the question of what do we build, now the question has become what can I get done in one evolution? So there's an immediate now, every feature team we establish now has a mandate to reduce scope and to focus on what we need to do to have the biggest impact for our customers. And the great thing about that is that since we're only spending 2 weeks, if we ship something in 2 weeks, we get it out there, we measure, and it all looks good, we are going to spend more time on it. And we have that opportunity because we didn't spend 3 months or 2 months like we did before. So how did HotelTonight do with this new system? Well, in 2016, we shipped 57 iOS and Android versions, and we released 88 new features in our apps. So I'm a big proponent of this. The release train and evolutions of HotelTonight has been really good. So now I kind of want to take a real-world example and show you how we apply this release system into something that we actually built, and something we built actually last fall. So we start to look at our referral program on our app. Now, this is a feature that allows users to invite other people to HotelTonight. And when you invite someone to HotelTonight, they get $25 and you get $25. So this was a feature we haven't really touched in a few years. And we decided, there were a lot of opportunities here, we wanted to try it out. So as we looked around and started doing research, we quickly got excited because we saw lots of opportunities to improve this entire experience. And we narrowed down that list into 4 things we wanted to change. The first was we wanted to improve the UI. The current design had a few problems. First, there's a lot of text on there. it's not really immediately clear what the purpose of the screen is, and also there's a lot of different calls to action. So we set our designers on it, and we want to implement a clean new design. From discussions with some other companies, we also wanted to try out using a custom share sheet. So instead of seeing the native iOS or Android share sheet, we want to try to build our own and see if that raised conversion. The next thing we wanted to add was a way for our users to invite people directly from their address book without having to leave HotelTonight. Users would just select the contacts they wanted to send invites to, and our server would either send an SMS or email them. Next, we want to improve the visibility of the entire referral program inside the app. The referral program is a front-level tab in HotelTonight, but we kind of had a hypothesis that if we expose it in more spots, we might get more people sending referrals. And the last thing we want to do is we want to improve the sign-up experience for people who got referred. So instead of just dropping you off at the App Store, we want to first send people to a mobile web landing page where they would sign up. After that, we would direct them to the App Store. And when they launched the app, we would actually automatically sign them in, and then we would let them know that they have $25 ready to spend. So 4 big things. This was a pretty ambitious project. And if this was 2014 or the old way HotelTonight worked, we would do something like this. We would take 8 weeks, develop everything at the same time, and then have one really, really big release. But more realistically, what we would have done is we would have taken 6 weeks and, and everyone would relax and chilled out. And then the last 2 weeks, we all would have freaked out and then scrambled and cut scope and been really stressed out and then finished up the project and then shipped. So let me show you, though, how we actually did it when we did this last fall. So we still took 8 weeks to do it, but we used our evolution and release train system. So we scoped out the new UI work as being 2 evolutions. Then we scoped out the contact book evolutions as being 2 evolutions. The improved visibility, we costed that at 1 evolution. And lastly, the landing page evo, we did one evolution. So this was already nice too, because we could use 2 engineers and stack them. So we could have one engineer work on the new UI work and then move on to the improved visibility. Similarly, we could have the other engineer work on contact book and then finish up a landing page evo. And how do we release this project? Well, remember that we have the release train going. So every other week, we ship iOS, Android, iOS, Android. So what this meant was as soon as the new UI work was done, we could ship it to Android. And the following week, we could ship iOS. Similar, as soon as our contact book evo was done, we could ship both of those in Android and both of those on iOS the following week. Then following up with the landing page evo. And what my favorite thing about this whole thing is that we started to get data back and numbers back before we even started the last part of the project. It was really kind of inspiring to the team to see their work validated before the project's even over. And another big thing too is that we A/B tested everything in this project. And let me just kind of walk you through the 4 A/B tests we did on this project. The first was we actually A/B tested the entire UI. So we kept the old design of the app, and we tested it against a new invite screen. We A/B tested the contact book. So we sent some users, we only allowed some users to see the share sheet, but we allowed some other users to see the contact book. We A/B tested the improved visibility. Some users saw these additional views and additional treatment in the app. Some users didn't. Lastly, we tested the entire landing page flow. So some users got sent to the landing page, and some users got sent to the App Store. And I love this because we knew what worked and we knew what didn't. So for example, the landing page stuff was a home run. It was great. It worked really, really well. But the increased visibility, not so much. This was one of the most ambitious and largest A/B testing things we've ever done at HotelTonight. So I kind of want to give a few tips that I learned from being one of the engineers on the project. And these are just a few things that you can do to make your life easier when you're doing these large-scale projects. So the first was we were implementing the new UI for the invite thing. And how we started off was we took our existing invite view controller. And we started, defining the new behavior using if statements and using Aptimize as dynamic variables. So in every single function in our view controller, we were branching off this Aptimize variable. So this got messy really, really fast. Our 100-line view controller suddenly became a 300-line view controller. So another engineer on my team actually had a really good suggestion, which What you do is instead of us having just one file with all these branches things, we duplicate the file. And we name the new one v2. And why I really like this is because we can keep our old variant, our old controller as is. QA's already tested it, we know it works, we don't have to touch it. But we can now have a new canvas for the new controller to kind of improve tech debt, improve other things, and keep the code really clean. And the best part is that we only now have to branch off one time. So when we're saying show invite controller now, we only need to check that dynamic variable once, and then we can load the correct view controller. I think also a really big important thing to keep in mind is that you want to make it really, really easy to delete the losing variant. And in this example here, all I had to do after it was just delete that old view controller and delete that one if statement. That was a huge win. My next tip is make sure you use dynamic variables and feature flags liberally as much as possible. If you're working on the feature, instead of hard coding behaviors and strings in the app, strongly consider making them dynamic variables. And I just wanted a message is that it's okay to ship with extra dynamic variables and code blocks. Even if you don't have an experiment planned or experiments planned, remember that we ship to the App Store, we ship binaries. We want to make sure that after it goes out live, you have enough levers, so in case something isn't working or something isn't going well, that you have those options to launch an experiment after the fact. This will save you time and give you more confidence when you're shipped. So if you're ever in a stand-up and there's a question about should we show 3 things or 4 things, 5 things or 2 things, at HotelTonight, we often say, let's just wrap it as an optimized variable, then we can ship it after the fact, or we can change it after the fact. It really helps out a lot. And another key point, remember, no one gets fired for putting something behind a feature flag. Use feature flags as much as possible. Just have fun with them. They're great. So the referrals project at HotelTonight was our largest project in Q4. And I'm really happy to say, we saw a 50% increase in number of referrals sent. It was a huge, huge win, and we saw a significant boost in bookings per month. And I'm really, really strongly convinced that the reason for the success of this project is because we had the right mobile release process in place. And by establishing that right mobile release process, you will have a huge impact on your product's quality. So that's it for my talk. I really appreciate everyone here taking the time to come hear me. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That was very interesting. We've got a couple of questions I think we've definitely got some time for as well. So one of the ones that came in, with releases happening every 2 weeks, does that create a lot of overhead in terms of prior app versions? If so, how do you manage that?
I would say no. I think that we're pretty lucky because we have a pretty strong upgrade path for iOS. We see roughly, I say 89% people go on to the next version. And our general message is, I mean, there's not much we can do about maintaining old versions. If there's an old version that has a bug or a crash, the only thing we can tend to tell users is that make sure you're updated to the latest version. So we don't really see that as being a major concern because, yeah, if we ever get a CX complaint or something like that, our direction is just upgrade to the latest version.
Okay, cool. And kind of following on from that, do you always release features with parity between iOS and Android? Is there a benefit to shipping iOS first, learning, developing for Android, or do you see the users being too different and them not being related?
So at HotelTonight, we try to keep feature parity as much as possible between iOS and Android. The exception being is that if there's an Android-specific feature or like a Android or iOS-specific feature, for example, Apple Pay, iOS, Android Pay, different kind of details like that. We do, however, we don't maintain parity between mobile web and the native apps. We view mobile web as kind of a jumping off point, a selling point to get to our native experience. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, generally as a kind of rule, we try to make sure that, and it schedules out pretty well, but we try to do everything we do in iOS, everything in Android. And as far as to the second point of who ships first, honestly, I like shipping second, even though that doesn't really happen because it tends to be the person who ships first has to solve all the hard problems, and you just get to kind of lean back and take all the credit. So. No, but really, we try to, it's wherever the train falls, and wherever, based on scheduling and all that stuff, works out.
Okay, and then one that I found quite interesting as well is how do you accommodate larger scale changes that take longer than 7 days to build with the evolution model? Do you feel that this might limit innovation in any way?
No, actually, so what we're doing is kind of what we did with this project, is that it's okay to take multiple evolutions. So if a project takes 3 or 4 evolutions, that's fine. But the important thing is that we're not going to hold up a release, or we're not going to stop releasing because there's a bigger feature going on. Like recently, we did an entire redesign of HotelTonight, and we did not do a redesign in 7 days. But instead, we actually took around 3 months to do it. But while that feature was going on, in the background, we had that release train coming to the station, and it's also okay to skip a version. So if you don't have anything ready to go out, then in 2 weeks you check again. So that's kind of how we kind of do that. Like, so yeah, we're not afraid to take bigger projects because some stuff does take a lot longer. But yeah, that's how we accommodate that.
Cool. Continuing on a very similar train of thought, how does the prod scoping UX UI design phases work into the release train?
Yeah, interesting. So I will admit that's kind of a challenge for us. Is like, I'm sure there's lots of designers here and product managers in the room that would like. Engineering, I feel like really enjoys really moving fast, but I've never met a designer who has said they only want like 2 days to work on something. So we try to be really aggressive with our Sprint Zero and really making sure that before engineering starts and before this kind of evolution period starts where engineers are programming coding, we've done the time to take the research and get the specs together and get designs ready. So oftentimes before we even start a feature or something like that, there might be a 2-week or maybe a month lead time before engineers start on this project. Engineers will be involved with the process and will be kind of like checking in and stuff like that. But I see them as almost two things. Like everyone won't start working on the feature in 7 days, but rather we're more concerned about keeping the scope of the development within 7 days of whatever we design or whatever we plan.
Okay, cool. We had a couple of questions about the QA process as well, so these two can kind of be lumped together. Did you have to ramp up your QA team after moving to the 2-week evolution? And, in the same question, how many QA resources do you have that support this release cycle? Do you leverage automation in any way? So,
as far as the kind of transition, I think the entire team, engineering and QA, had to kind of go through a transition. It's kind of a hard switch to flip where, instead of, we were still like, in this mindset where the next release we have to get everything in. And, it took a while for people to just be like, okay, it's fine. If it doesn't get in today, it will get in 2 weeks. QA resources, so we have, let me remember, we have three manual QA resources in San Francisco, and we have an offsite regression team in Costa Rica. And as far as automation, we've tried in the past. We have not had success yet with leveraging automation. There's something that we have our eye on. But I think one thing we've also found with the fast pace that we've moved, it's been hard for us to keep up with our automation suite, to keep up with our actual code and stuff like that. So that's something that we would like to solve in the next couple of years, and we have our eye on that for sure.
Okay, time for one more as well. So doesn't the release train model create friction in helping management determine key metrics or OKRs in advance, since you never really know what's going to ship in an exact time frame?
Well, I will say that we try to keep things as on the schedule for sure. I might be a little more casual than it is, but we do definitely have target dates for every feature. And we try to, when we do our roadmap, try to make sure we are planning that this will hit this version. So, we have the evolution plan, and we know that this version will hit that date. And we try to keep to those dates as much as possible, but we try to be flexible. And we've gotten pretty good at hitting those dates and kind of betting when that's going to happen correctly. But, this is software. Stuff goes wrong all the time. So sometimes we miss those dates. And I think now we've been pretty lucky that we've been able to communicate, and management's kind of come on board with this new process of kind of moving fast, getting stuff done. And truth be told, I think now everyone's happier that we have this process in place versus a few years back when it was, missing a date when you only ship every 3 months was a much bigger deal than missing a date when you ship every 2 weeks. If that makes sense.
Cool. Right, well, that kind of wraps up. So, again, thank you very much, Doug. We'll get another round of applause for Doug. It'll be great. Cheers, Doug. Thank you very much.